Nice truck, Kelly. What is that, a 2008? I didn't know they still made parts for those things. The laughter spread across the picnic tables like a wave. My brother Brad stood there in his designer polo, car keys dangling from his fingers, that smirk cutting across his face like he just delivered the punchline of the century. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just took another bite of my hot dog and watched him bask in the attention. If you've ever been the family member they underestimate, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes. My name is Kelly Strong. I'm 31 years old. And that muddy 2009 Ford F-150 sitting in my parents' driveway has more than 300,000 miles on it. The bumper is dented. The passenger mirror is held on with electrical tape. There's a crack in the windshield that's been there since 2019. And I love that truck more than almost anything I own, which is saying something, because I own quite a lot. But we'll get to that. The reunion was at my parents' place in rural Ohio. Same backyard I grew up in, same folding tables with the plastic red checkered tablecloths, same aunts bringing the same casseroles, same cousins chasing the same dog around the same oak tree, and the same dynamic that had defined my entire life. Brad was the star. Always had been. 4 years younger than me, but somehow always the center of every conversation. The golden child. The one with the vision. The one my parents talked about at church, at the grocery store, at every single family gathering for the past decade. Brad's doing so well with his business. Brad just bought a new Tesla. Brad's been featured in an online magazine. I heard it all. I'd been hearing it for years. What I never heard was anyone mention that I'd been the one paying for his first semester of college when our parents fell behind on the bills. That was $8,400. Or that I'd covered the deposit on his first apartment when he moved to Columbus to pursue his dreams. Another $2,200. Or that I'd quietly paid off the credit card debt he'd racked up during his startup phase, so Mom and Dad wouldn't find out he was $14,000 in the hole before he turned 23. Nobody mentioned any of that. Because Brad didn't mention it, and I never asked for credit. I just did what I always did. I fixed things. I stayed quiet. I showed up in my beat-up truck with a six-pack and a smile, and I let Brad have the spotlight because that's what kept the peace. That's what kept Mom happy. And keeping Mom happy was the only currency that ever seemed to matter in this family. Brad's business was called Brad's Bargains. Drop shipping. He'd explain it to anyone who'd listen, usually without being asked. He'd source cheap products overseas, mark them up, sell them through his website, and let a third-party logistics company handle the shipping. It's passive income, he'd say, leaning back in his chair like he'd invented the concept. I barely have to do anything. The system runs itself. He loved that phrase. The system runs itself. He had no idea how right he was. The reunion was in full swing when Brad decided to make his entrance. He'd pulled up in a matte black BMW, the kind that costs more than most people's houses. He parked it right in the middle of the front yard, angled just so, like he was posing for a magazine shoot. Then he stepped out, sunglasses on, and waited for the applause. And he got it. Aunt Linda clapped her hands together. "Oh, Bradley, it's beautiful." Uncle Ron whistled. "That's a machine right there." Mom came rushing out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron, beaming like he'd just won the Nobel Prize. "Bradley, honey, you didn't tell me you got a new car." "Wanted it to be a surprise," he said, pulling her into a hug. "Business is booming, Mom. Figured I deserved a little upgrade." I was sitting at the far end of the picnic table, plate in front of me, watching the whole thing unfold. My cousin Darla leaned over and whispered, "Must be nice." I just shrugged. "He works hard." I didn't believe it. But I said it anyway. That was the pattern. Brad made his way through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting compliments, telling anyone who'd listen about his 7-figure trajectory and his plans to expand into international markets. Then he saw my truck. He stopped mid-sentence, stared at it, then burst out laughing. "Kel, please tell me that's not yours." I looked up from my plate. "It's mine." "Oh my God." He walked over to it, running his hand along the dusty hood like he was inspecting a crime scene. "This thing is ancient. What year is this? Like 2005? 2009. Even worse." He turned back to the crowd, grinning. "You know, sis, if you ever need a loan, just ask. I'm happy to help family. The laughter came again, softer this time, but still there. A few uncomfortable chuckles. A couple of genuine snickers from cousins who'd always liked Brad better. Mom didn't say anything. She just smiled that tight little smile she always wore when she didn't want to take sides, but also didn't want to defend me. Dad was already back at the grill, flipping burgers, pretending he hadn't heard. I didn't respond. I just finished my hot dog and reached for another. Brad wasn't done. He walked back over to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from me. Seriously though, Kelly. What's going on with you? Still doing that warehouse thing? Logistics, I said. Right. Logistics. He said the word like it was a joke. Forklifts and shipping labels? Real glamorous. It pays the bills. Barely, from the looks of it. He gestured toward my truck. I mean, come on. You're 31. You should be thriving by now. I'm 27, and I'm already looking at buying a vacation property in Florida. I took a sip of my lemonade. That's great, Brad. It is great. He leaned forward. You know what your problem is? You never think big. You've always been like that. Content to just exist. No vision? No ambition? I set my cup down slowly. I'm doing fine. Fine isn't success, Kel. Fine is settling. He spread his hands wide. Look at me. I took a risk. I built something. I didn't just punch a clock and hope for the best. I made things happen. You did, I said. You definitely made things happen. He missed the tone completely. Exactly. And that's the difference between us. I see opportunities. You see obstacles. He stood up, clapping me on the shoulder like he was giving me a pep talk. But hey, there's still time. Maybe I can give you some pointers, help you get on track. I looked up at him, held his gaze for just a moment longer than comfortable. I appreciate that, Brad. Really. He winked. That's what family's for. Then he wandered off to accept more praise from relatives who didn't know any better. I stayed at the table. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen showed a notification from my operations manager, Diane Chen. One word. Urgent. I excused myself quietly. No one noticed. I walked around the side of the house, past the garage, and leaned against the fence where no one could hear me. I called her back. Diane, what's going on? We've got a problem. Her voice was tight, professional but tense. One of our contracted accounts just got flagged. Repeated breach of shipping terms, falsified product declarations, undisclosed hazardous materials in 3 separate shipments. I closed my eyes. Which account? She paused. Brad's bargains. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Kelly, you still there? I'm here. I opened my eyes, looked out at the backyard. I could see Brad through the gap in the fence, standing by his BMW, showing off the interior to my Uncle Ron. What's the exposure? If we don't act, we're liable. He's been routing counterfeit electronics through our network for at least 3 months. The customs flags just came in this morning. If this goes public, it's not just his problem. It's ours. I exhaled slowly. My company, Strong Logistics, 12 distribution centers across the Midwest, 418 employees. Contracts with major retailers, regional manufacturers, and yes, a handful of small e-commerce businesses that used our infrastructure to move their products, including Brad's bargains. He had no idea. He'd signed the contract through a third-party broker, never read the fine print, never bothered to learn who actually owned the fleet that made his passive income possible. He just assumed the system ran itself. Diane, I said quietly, freeze the account. All shipments? All of them. Effective immediately. Cite breach of contract. Flag everything in transit for inspection. That's going to shut him down, Kelly. He's got over $40,000 in inventory moving through our system right now. I know. She paused. You sure about this? I looked through the fence again. Brad was laughing at something, that same loud, confident laugh he'd had since we were kids. The laugh that always came at someone else's expense, usually mine. I'm sure, I said. Send the notice. I hung up. Then I walked back to the picnic table, sat down, and waited. It took about 4 minutes. Brad's phone started buzzing. Then it started ringing. Then it didn't stop. He pulled it out, frowning. Answered. His face went pale almost instantly. What do you mean, frozen? That's impossible. I have shipments going out tomorrow. I took another sip of my lemonade. He hung up, called someone else, started pacing. No, this can't be happening. I have orders. I have customers. I have... His voice cracked. Mom looked over. Bradley? Honey, what's wrong? He didn't answer. He just stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. I stayed quiet. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, in my faded jeans and my old flannel shirt, next to my beat-up truck, and watched my little brother finally meet the consequences he'd been outrunning his whole life. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. Brad's second call ended worse than the first. I could tell by the way his hand started shaking, the way he pressed the phone harder against his ear like he could force better news through the speaker. What do you mean the whole account is locked? I've been with you guys for 2 years. 2 years? He was talking to his broker, the middleman who'd set up his logistics contract, the one who'd never told him who actually owned the network he depended on. I finished my lemonade, set the cup down gently. This has to be a mistake, Brad was saying, his voice climbing higher. I haven't breached anything. My products are legitimate. This is... He stopped, listened. His face went from pale to gray. Counterfeit? That's insane. I source directly from verified suppliers. I have documentation. I have... Another pause. Longer this time. $43,000? In transit? And it's all frozen? He looked like someone had just told him his BMW was actually a rental. Mom was on her feet now, moving toward him. Bradley, what's happening? Talk to me. He held up a hand to stop her. I need to make some calls. This is a misunderstanding. Someone flagged my account by accident. He walked away from the crowd, toward the side of the house, toward the exact spot where I'd been standing 10 minutes earlier. I watched him go. Aunt Linda leaned over to my mother. Is everything okay with Bradley? Mom's smile was tight, worried. I'm sure it's just a work thing. You know how these tech businesses are? Very fast-paced. I almost laughed. Almost. Dad came over with a plate of burgers, completely oblivious. Who's hungry? I got some with cheese, some without. I took one without cheese. Thanks, Dad. He nodded, already moving on to the next table. Some things never change. 20 minutes passed. Brad made call after call. I could see him through the kitchen window, pacing back and forth, running his hand through his hair until it stood up at odd angles. His designer polo was starting to show sweat stains under the arms. I stayed at my table, talked to Darla about her kids, complimented Aunt Linda on her potato salad, laughed at Uncle Ron's terrible jokes about fishing, normal family reunion behavior. The only difference was the phone buzzing in my pocket every few minutes. Updates from Diane. The account freeze was complete. Customs had flagged 12 additional shipments for inspection. 3 of them contained electronics with falsified safety certifications. Brad's verified suppliers had been selling him counterfeits. And he'd been too busy counting his passive income to notice. Or maybe he had noticed. Maybe he just didn't care. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Brad finally came back to the party. He looked like he'd aged 5 years and half an hour. His phone was clutched in his hand like a lifeline, but he'd stopped making calls. He walked straight to me. Kelly. I looked up. Hey, Brad. You okay? You look a little pale. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. I need to ask you something, he said. His voice was lower now, quieter. None of the bravado from earlier. Sure. You work in logistics, right? I do. Do you know anything about a company called Strong Logistics? I held his gaze, didn't blink. I've heard of them. They just froze my entire account. Everything. $43,000 in inventory, just sitting in warehouses. They're saying I breached my contract. Something about counterfeit products and hazardous materials. That sounds serious. It is serious. His voice cracked again. I could lose everything. My business, my reputation, my... He stopped, swallowed hard. I need to talk to someone there, someone in charge, but no one will take my calls. I nodded slowly. That must be frustrating. Kelly. He leaned closer, lowering his voice even more. Do you know anyone? Anyone at all who could help me get this sorted out? I'll pay whatever it takes. I just need someone to listen. I looked at him for a long moment. My little brother, the golden child, the one who'd mocked my truck in front of the whole family, the one who'd called me a failure, a settler, someone with no vision or ambition, the one who had no idea that the woman sitting in front of him owned the company that was currently dismantling his entire life. Something inside me shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, quiet break. I was done pretending this was okay. Brad, I said calmly, I need to tell you something. He waited, desperate hope flickering in his eyes. Strong logistics. I paused. Let the words settle. That's my company. I own it. He blinked. Once. Twice. What? I started it 8 years ago. Worked my way up from driving delivery routes to running the whole operation. 12 distribution centers, 418 employees, annual revenue of $47 million. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's impossible. You drive a beat-up truck. You wear flannel shirts? I do. But you said... I said I work in logistics. I do. I work very hard at it, actually. I stood up slowly. And part of that work is making sure my company isn't exposed to liability from clients who ship counterfeit products through my network. The color drained from his face completely. Kelly, wait, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. My suppliers, they... You signed a contract, Brad. Page 14, Section 7, Paragraph 3. All products shipped through Strong Logistics must comply with federal safety standards and import regulations. Falsified documentation constitutes immediate grounds for account termination. His voice came out as a whisper. You're terminating me? I already did, 26 minutes ago. He staggered back a step, like I'd hit him. Kelly, please, you have to help me. I'm your brother. I looked at him steadily. You're my brother who called me a failure an hour ago, who laughed at my truck, who told me I had no vision, no ambition, that I was just existing while you built something. I didn't mean... You meant every word, you always do. I took a breath, let it out slowly. And that's fine. You're entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to my infrastructure. The panic in his eyes turned to something else, desperation. What am I supposed to do? I have orders, customers. I'll have to refund everything. I'll lose the BMW, the apartment, everything I've built. You'll figure it out. You're a visionary, remember? Someone who sees opportunities. Kelly, please. His voice broke. I'm begging you. I'd waited years to hear those words. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, mocked. Years of quietly paying his debts and fixing his problems and never asking for credit. And now here he was, begging. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not triumph, not even anger, just clarity. Brad, I said quietly, I need you to understand something. This isn't revenge. This is business. You put my company at risk, my employees, my reputation. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting what I built. But, and honestly, you'd do the same thing if our positions were reversed. We both know that. He had no response to that, because we both knew it was true. Mom appeared at his elbow. What's going on? Bradley, you look terrible. Kelly, what's happening? Brad turned to her, his voice shaking. Mom, Kelly owns the company that froze my account. She shut down my business. Mom looked at me. Her expression was confused, disbelieving. Kelly? What is he talking about? I own Strong Logistics, Mom. Have for 8 years. Brad's company was using my network to ship counterfeit products. It's a liability issue. She stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. But you drive that old truck. I like my truck. And you never said anything about any of this. Nobody ever asked. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable, heavy. Then Mom did what she always did. She turned to Brad, put her hand on his arm, and said, Honey, I'm sure this can be worked out. Kelly, can't you just make an exception for family? I looked at my mother. The woman who'd spent 31 years making excuses for my brother, who'd celebrated his every minor achievement while ignoring mine entirely, who'd never once asked me how my business was going because she didn't believe I had one worth asking about. "No, Mom," I said. "I can't." Her face tightened. "Kellyanne Strong, this is your brother. Your family. He's also a client who violated his contract and put my company at legal risk. Family doesn't change that." "But surely," I said no. The words hung in the air, simple, final. Mom's eyes went wide. She wasn't used to hearing that word from me. Neither was Brad. Neither was I, honestly. But it felt right. It felt like the first honest thing I'd said at a family reunion in years. Brad was still staring at me, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally settling on something that looked almost like respect. Or maybe just shock. "You really did it," he said quietly. "You actually built something." "I did." "And you never told anyone." "I told the people who mattered. My employees, my partners, the people who actually believed in me." I picked up my paper plate, my empty cup. "But I should probably go. I have some calls to make." I walked toward my truck. The beat-up, dented, 300,000-mile truck that had carried me through every step of building my company. The truck Brad had mocked an hour ago without knowing that the woman who owned it could end his career with a single phone call. I opened the driver's door. "Kelly, wait." I turned. Brad was walking toward me. Behind him, the whole family was watching. Mom, Dad, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone frozen in place like a photograph. "What happens now?" Brad asked. His voice was small, lost. "That's up to you," I said. "You can fight it, hire lawyers, try to prove the products weren't counterfeit, but the documentation is solid, Brad. I've seen it. And if I don't fight it, then you start over. Find new suppliers, find a new logistics partner, build something legitimate this time." He stood there, shoulders slumped, all the swagger drained out of him. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "I don't know how to start from nothing." "I do." I climbed into my truck. But that's not really my problem anymore. I started the engine. It rumbled to life with that familiar, comforting growl. Brad just stood there, watching. Mom was crying now. Dad had his arm around her, looking confused, like he'd walked into the middle of a movie and couldn't figure out the plot. I put the truck in reverse, backed out of the driveway slowly. The last thing I saw was Brad standing alone in the yard, his matte black BMW gleaming behind him like a monument to everything he was about to lose. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. I just drove. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty and quiet. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed. Another update from Diane. The customs investigation was proceeding. 3 of Brad's suppliers had already been flagged for additional scrutiny. The liability shield was holding. My company was safe. I was safe. I turned onto the highway, heading back toward the life I'd built, the life no one in my family had ever bothered to see. The rearview mirror showed nothing but fading farmland and a sky full of fading light. For the first time in 31 years, I drove away from a family reunion without carrying anyone else's problems with me. The truck hummed beneath me, the road was clear, and I didn't look back. The weeks following the reunion were quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet I was used to. Not the silence of swallowing words I should have said or pretending I hadn't heard something cruel. This was different. This was peace. I blocked Brad's number the night I got home, then Mom's, then Dad's. I went through my contacts methodically, removing every family member who had laughed at my truck, who had celebrated Brad's fake success while ignoring mine, who had spent decades treating me like the help. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. I removed myself from the family group chat, deleted the shared photo albums, changed my emergency contacts to Diane and my attorney. The notifications stopped. The guilt calls stopped. The requests for money disguised as casual conversation stopped. And I slept through the night for the first time in years. 3 weeks later, word started filtering back through industry channels. Brad's bargains had suspended operations. His website showed a message about temporary fulfillment delays. His social media went silent. The customs investigation had expanded. 12 shipments flagged became 23. The falsified safety certifications turned out to be part of a larger pattern. Brad's verified suppliers were actually a network of counterfeit operations based overseas, and he'd been their biggest domestic distributor. Whether he knew or not didn't matter anymore. The liability was his. I heard he'd tried to find another logistics partner, called every company in the region. But word travels fast in this industry. Nobody wanted to touch an account that had already been flagged by customs. Nobody wanted the risk. The BMW went first. I found out from a cousin who still talked to Darla. Brad had missed 2 payments. The dealership repossessed it on a Tuesday morning, right in front of his apartment building. The neighbors watched the whole thing. Then the apartment went. He'd been 3 months behind on rent, spending every dollar trying to save his business instead of keeping a roof over his head. The eviction notice came in August. By September, he was living in Mom and Dad's basement, the same basement where I'd done homework as a kid, while Brad got the bigger bedroom upstairs. Some things do change, I guess. Mom called from a blocked number once. I answered without thinking. "Kelly, please." Her voice was thin, tired. "Bradley is struggling. He needs help. He needs family." I stayed quiet. "He made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But he's your brother. He's blood." "He shipped counterfeit products through my network, Mom. He put my company at risk. My employees. 418 people who depend on me for their livelihoods. But surely there's something you can do. Some way to fix this. You are always so good at fixing things." I almost laughed. Almost. "That's exactly the problem, Mom. I've been fixing things for 20 years, paying his debts, covering his mistakes, making excuses for him so you wouldn't have to face who he really is." I paused, let the silence breathe. "I'm done fixing things for people who never even noticed I was doing it." "Kellyanne, goodbye, Mom." I hung up, blocked the number, didn't feel a thing. 8 months later, everything had changed. Brad's legal situation had gotten worse before it got better. The customs investigation led to a fraud inquiry. Nothing criminal, but enough to destroy whatever remained of his reputation. His credit score dropped to 487. His name appeared in industry blacklists. No legitimate supplier would work with him. He got a job at a warehouse, not one of mine. A competitor's facility on the other side of Columbus. Night shifts, minimum wage, plus $1. He drove a 2011 Honda Civic now, bought with what was left of his savings after the lawyers took their cut. Mom and Dad's house went on the market that spring. They'd refinanced twice over the years to help Brad with his business ventures. The payments finally caught up with them. They sold for less than they owed and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex with shared laundry in the basement. Dad started driving for a rideshare company. He was 63 years old, working nights to make ends meet. Mom picked up shifts at a grocery store, stocking shelves 3 days a week. The family dinners stopped. The reunions stopped. The cousins drifted apart, nobody wanting to talk about what had happened, everyone pretending the Strongs had simply gotten busy. I heard all of this secondhand. Through Darla, who called once to say she was sorry. Through industry contacts who mentioned seeing Brad at the warehouse. Through public records that showed the house sale, the credit inquiries, the slow unraveling of everything my family had built their identity around. I didn't seek out the information. I didn't gloat over it. I just noted it and moved on. Because I had other things to focus on. 1 year later, I stood in the parking lot of my newest distribution center, number 13. A state-of-the-art facility in Indianapolis, handling triple the volume of my original warehouse. The sun was setting, painting the building in shades of gold and orange. Inside, forklifts hummed, conveyor belts rolled. 418 employees had become 512. Diane walked up beside me, tablet in hand. The quarterly numbers came in. We're up 16% over projections. Good. And that partnership with the automotive manufacturer went through. They're signing next week. I nodded. Set up the meeting. I want to be there. She made a note. Then she looked at me, a small smile on her face. You know, you could take a vacation. You've earned it. Maybe. I'm serious. When's the last time you took a day off? I thought about it. Couldn't remember. I'll think about it. I said. I drove home that night in my truck. Same beat-up 2009 F-150. Same dented bumper, same cracked windshield. I'd had offers to replace it. Company cars, executive vehicles, things that looked the part. I didn't want them. This truck had carried me through every step, every late-night delivery run when I was just starting out, every breakdown on the side of the highway that taught me how to improvise, every mile of the 300,000 that had brought me here. I loved that truck. It reminded me where I came from. And more importantly, it reminded me that appearances don't matter. Results do. I pulled into my driveway. A modest house on 3 acres, nothing flashy, just enough space for a vegetable garden and a workshop where I rebuilt old engines on weekends. The porch light was on. The air smelled like cut grass and possibility. Inside, I made dinner, nothing fancy. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine. I ate at my kitchen table, looking out at the backyard where fireflies were starting to blink in the early summer darkness. My phone sat on the counter, silent. No notifications from blocked numbers. No desperate calls for help. No guilt trips disguised as concern. Just quiet. I thought about Brad sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I wondered if he'd learned anything. If he'd figured out that success isn't about looking successful, it's about building something real, something that lasts. I doubted it. Some people never learn, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I finished my dinner, washed the dishes, walked out onto the porch and sat in the old rocking chair I'd bought at a yard sale 15 years ago. The sky was full of stars. The night was warm. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out and another answered. I thought about all the reunions I'd sat through, smiling while my brother mocked me. All the checks I'd written to cover his mistakes. All the years I'd spent being the invisible one, the reliable one, the one who fixed things and never asked for credit. Those years were over. I'd built something real, something that mattered. Something that would outlast every flashy car and designer polo and empty boast my brother had ever made. And I'd done it without anyone's help, without anyone's approval, without anyone even noticing until it was too late. The rocking chair creaked softly as I settled back. The stars wheeled overhead. The fireflies danced in the darkness like tiny promises. I never regretted a single second of it. Some doors close so better ones can open. I'd closed the door on a family that only valued me for what I could give them, and I'd opened a door to a life where I valued myself. That was enough. That was more than enough. The truck sat in the driveway, mud-splattered and dented and perfect. The company I'd built hummed along without me for one quiet evening. The life I'd created stretched out ahead of me, full of possibility and peace. I didn't look back. If you enjoyed this story about knowing your worth and building something real while everyone else was busy underestimating you, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.